Dorothy stood in the kitchen and thoughtfully washed the kettle for about 10 minutes, thinking about when all this would end and how she would get out of this situation. She felt that she no longer believed in her marriage, and it depressed her more and more, and how well it had all started. Nathan was courting her romantically and charmingly. He serenaded her under the windows, gave her flowers every day, and always different ones, until he realized that she loved orchids most of all, and after that, he gave them only. He thought then that it would be like that forever, maybe without orchids, but certainly with Nathan next to her. Soon, Nathan asked Dorothy to be his wife, and she immediately agreed. She seemed to glow with happiness at the wedding, and Nathan kept whispering his vows of eternal love to her. They lived in Nathan's apartment that his parents had presented to him a few years ago. The apartment was next to the office where Dorothy and her college friend Sharon had been working as designers for 3 years. True, Sharon soon got married too and moved in with her husband to a neighboring city. Dorothy liked the apartment. The only thing that annoyed her was that one of the 2 rooms was filled with musical instruments. Nathan was a musician and a band leader, but they had no success and their performances brought no money. Like Nathan, Ethan could earn outside of musical activities was usually spent on rehearsals and transportation of equipment. At first, Dorothy's domestic problems did not bother her as she was working and had enough money. But then, after giving birth to a child, Dorothy immersed herself in home life and felt how much she missed Nathan's help. He was always away at rehearsals, dealing with some band issues and coming home late, almost always drunk. Dorothy longed to feed him dinner and just talk, but she did not want to be a capricious and grumpy wife, and she said nothing. One day, after her son was born, she asked Nathan to go for a walk with little Spencer, as she wanted to sleep for at least half an hour and get some rest. But her husband just looked at her in surprise and irritably said, "These are your responsibilities, Dorothy. I can't do all this nonsense. Do you want me to become a well-known musician or not?" And then Dorothy clearly understood that nothing was going to change. And it wasn't because he hadn't given her orchids for a long time. Nathan had changed a lot, and he didn't care about her and Spencer. Dorothy was ready for one last conversation with her husband. But disaster struck. Her mother died of an illness. After the funeral, Dorothy fell into a stupor and depression. Nathan started bringing orchids again, and Dorothy even thought that in this way, he was trying to support her. But as it turned out, it was something else entirely. Soon, Nathan started talking about selling her mother's apartment. He offered to use the proceeds to buy a minibus, which he planned to use for rehearsals and tours. Dorothy almost laughed, because her husband had never been away for performances beyond the local clubs, but she didn't argue. They bought the car and put the rest of the money in the bank. But of course, everything continued as before. Spencer started teething, and Dorothy could not sleep at night, listening to the moans of her baby. Nathan was often absent during these nights. However, his band performances did not bring in enough money for the household, and they lived primarily on the children's allowance. One day, the telephone rang, and Dorothy was overjoyed to hear the cheerful voice of her friend Sharon. Sharon reported that she and her husband would soon be going on vacation abroad, and she tearfully asked Dorothy to stay in their home and look after Rocky the Spaniel. Dorothy was happy because she had longed for a change of scenery, at least for a while. She shared her worries with Sharon, and her friend said firmly, "That's it. It's settled. But come to us with Spencer. I'll be back from vacation, and we'll figure it out. Maybe you don't have to go back to your husband. Stay here, find a job, and you can live with us as long as you need. The house is big." Dorothy made up her mind. She hastily packed some of her things and Spencer's clothes into a suitcase, took her documents and driver's license, and left Nathan a note explaining that she was leaving for good and would file for divorce. As Dorothy was putting the baby seat in the car, she realized that it was getting dark and cold outside. She drove to a gas station on the outskirts of the city, filled the tank, but a few dozen kilometers away, the car stalled. Realizing they wouldn't make it to the nearest settlement on foot, Dorothy tried to call. But as luck would have it, there was no connection in the area. Then she tried to signal to passing cars by honking and flashing their lights, but no one stopped. 2 hours passed. It was deep into the night, and the highway was completely deserted. But then the lights of a car appeared in the distance. Dorothy ran out onto the road in despair and waved her hands. The Jeep stopped next to the woman, and a man got out. He tried to find out what was wrong, but Dorothy was so cold and tired that she could hardly speak. From her confused story, he only understood that they were going to the same city, that her car had broken down for some reason, and that the baby was freezing in it. Okay, let's do this. Get your things in the baby and his car seat out of the car and come over to my car. Don't worry, we are going in the same direction anyways. I'll take you where you need to be, and tomorrow you can call a tow truck, which will take your car to the station. Dorothy immediately agreed. The thought of freezing in the car with the baby frightened her. In the car, the man introduced himself as Gregory. He told her that he was going to his parents' house, who lived in the same city as her friend. His father had opened a new branch in that city while he was in charge of the old one. The man smiled and added good-naturedly that his parents would probably be the best people on earth if they didn't constantly pressure him to get married quickly. Better not rush into it, Dorothy blurted out. Gregory, surprised and cautiously asked, "Excuse me, are you speaking from your own experience?" Dorothy suddenly felt unashamed to tell the stranger everything, about her shattered dreams of family happiness and how she had to flee from her husband and hometown, and how it all started with a great love. Gregory listened thoughtfully, and they drove in silence for a while. "Dorothy, can you help me?" he suddenly asked. "You saved us today. I owe you one. Tell me what I can help you with, and I'll see what I can do." And Gregory told Dorothy that he had a girlfriend in the past, but she left him for a wealthier businessman from Greece. Then his parents decided to introduce him to a woman who worked at his father's company. They thought she was pretty and nice. Just with good moral principles, Gregory flatly refused. However, he was constantly reminded of the need to get married. In order to temporarily get them off his back, Gregory came up with a brilliant plan. He suggested that Dorothy accompany him to his parents' house and pretend to be his bride. At first, Dorothy wanted to laugh, but she remembered that she owed him a debt of gratitude, so she simply smiled and agreed. "All right, Gregory, but only tomorrow," she said. "My friend, whom I am driving to, is leaving for vacation and I will have no one to leave my baby with." She also expressed concern that Gregory's parents may not approve of a bride with a child from another man. However, Gregory assured her that his parents would not mind and thanked her for agreeing. He then invited her to dinner at their place the next evening. When Gregory picked up Dorothy the following evening, she was ready and waiting. He looked at her admiringly and assured her that his parents would definitely like her looks and kind disposition. Dorothy laughed and promised to talk less so as not to give herself away. When Gregory introduced Dorothy to his parents, he was speechless at how warmly they greeted her. It turned out that Dorothy was the same woman who worked in his father's company and whom his parents knew well. They had even predicted that she would be their son's future bride. When Dorothy returned home, Sharon questioned her about everything. Upon learning that Gregory was the son of their common boss, her friend let her imagination run wild and told Dorothy how things would go if she didn't hide her feelings. "Well, I can see that you like Gregory and he seems to like you too, even though he's only been with us for a short time," Sharon said. "Now, stop living in the past and punishing yourself for being wrong about Nathan. You're staying with us, getting a divorce, and coming to work for my boss, who may soon become your father-in-law. We'll enroll Spencer in kindergarten here, and everything will be fine. We're all gonna bed now. We have an early flight tomorrow, but I will stay in touch to be updated on how your relationship is progressing," Sharon said, winking conspiratorially at her friend. And as Sharon had predicted, events unfolded rapidly. Gregory visited Dorothy every day and one day finally confessed his feelings to her. When Dorothy also confessed her feelings in return, Gregory put her and her son in a car and took them to his parents. Dorothy was anxious that they would not accept her and her child, but when Gregory's mother approached them, Dorothy's worries were put to rest. "Hello, little one. I'm your new grandmother," she said warmly as she reached out her arms to Spencer. Dorothy couldn't believe what was happening. She had always thought this only happened in movies, but it was her new reality, where there was no place for Nate. A year later, she somehow came across a report about her ex-husband. However, it was not about the famous musician, but about the drunken hooligan who had disrupted a concert of a famous band. It seems that this was the fame he had always dreamed of, but he had made his own choices.